Philia, why? Why are you not a fan of proof? Why? If truth is what we are after, then wouldn't it behoove you to produce proof to any claim? Why not? What is the issue? Don't get it. So I'm going to touch briefly on, I guess Philia thinks by repeating things ad nauseum means they're true. And that doesn't bode well to us who are interested in facts. But you promote this video, Easter and the Church. You've got that on your main Philia page. And I've watched it. And I don't want to touch on everything, and maybe I will eventually in the comment section because it is so detailed. I mean, here's the problem. Because videos like this just bring a bunch of claims and throw it into a video, unless you've got all the time in the world, or it's hard to discern what is truth and what is fiction, and people just accept it. It's very disturbing. So where do I begin? Because this is quite detailed. I wrote some things down, and then I think I'll just discuss otherwise. We'll see. Because it's such a detailed topic, and the claims are plucked from this source and that source, none of which are historical. It's just mind-boggling why any honest person would just promote this without making sure that these facts are accurate. Blows my mind. Okay, so where do I start? First of all, Constantine. A lot of people love to blame a lot of things on Constantine. He just gets slammed, and I don't think he was born again or anything like that, but he gets more exposure than he needs to. Jehovah's Witnesses do it. Hebrew Roots do it. Torah observers, whatever you want to call yourselves. Muslims do it. And they blame everything on him. And he can't possibly have done absolutely everything. I mean, he was only alive a certain period of time. But anyway, so the video, Easter in the Church, brings in, the sources from the 1800s, the claim from the 1800s, as I talked about before, that people like to promote as factual. I mean, I had to pause it for a second. I fail to understand why people think that Alexander Hislop is an historian on from the 1800s on all things BC era. Like, where's the proof that he had? He just made a bunch of claims. And, this video and Philia loves to promote that. Although, I read Hislop. I read it all, because if you're going to claim a source, I'm going to read it all. And red dyeing eggs of children's blood is not in there. And so I don't know where that comes from. The two sources that people like to pull from is Hislop and Venerable Bede from, I think he was the 700s AD. And neither of those sources has that. So where's the historical sources? I don't even know why you think that's anyone who's cares about truth is going to take you seriously. I don't even know. Bede was 700. I wrote that down. And he said, Ostermonath, I don't know how you pronounce that, has a name which is now translated Pascal month, and which was also called after a goddess of theirs named Ostra, and whose honor feasts were celebrated in that month. Now they designate that Paschal season by her name, calling the joys of the new rite by the time-honored name of the old observance. Okay, so I would love to know how it's Constantine's fault in one breath when Bede came several hundred years later. I don't know. Um, so, so Bede himself admits that idea is speculation. He's not actually aware of a goddess called Ostra, or however you say that. He just thinks there's one. There's no single reference of her from the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles. If you look up the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, it's not in there, okay? Or any other writings from that time period, or from any inscriptions whatsoever. It's just not, there's no depiction, no amulets, nothing. There's nothing. And as far as her Germanic version, that was created by Hislop, is invented completely in the 19th century, and again has no evidence whatsoever from history or archaeology to back that up. It's just not there. So Bede was, as he often was, wrong, because there's no sources. And he himself admitted that that was his opinion. If you bother to read the first couple chapters of what is called the ecclesiastical history of his, you'll get the picture. It's just, he doesn't pull this off as fact. It's his opinion. So yeah, it's not fact. The other thing that I wanted to touch on briefly is, okay, if you go to ancient.eu and Semiramis, or however you say that she mentions in her video, I'd like to read from, okay, so this is a non-biased source. It's always helpful to read non-biased historical sources. They don't have a bias one way or another. They're not Catholic, they're not Protestant, they're not Christian at all. They're just a source. And they say on here, this Semiramis, she remains therefore one of the most controversial figures from ancient history and has become more so since the 19th century CE, when the Christian minister Alexander Hislop published his book, The Two Babylons, linking her with the Whore of Babylon from the biblical book of Revelation, chapter 17. Even though The Two Babylons is clearly anti-Catholic propaganda and has no claim to biblical or historical accuracy, it is still cited by certain Protestant Christian works as an authority on the subject. And the book, therefore, contributes to the controversy surrounding Semiramis. The book claims to cite only two examples of biblical inaccuracy. The Semiramis was Nimrod's wife, whereas chapter 10 of Genesis actually says no such thing, and famously insists that Semiramis is the Whore of Babylon when her name is nowhere mentioned in the Bible. The historical inaccuracies in the work are too numerous to mention. Even so, the book continues to exert a powerful influence over certain readers and their understanding of ancient history in general, and Semiramis specifically. Whether Semiramis was the model for Semiramis continues to be argued by modern historians who often cite the same ancient inscription for their conflicting arguments, and it does not seem to be a debate that will be settled anytime soon. Based on the evidence of Semiramis being able to erect her own stele at the prestigious city of Ashur, however, it would appear she was very impressive, very powerful Assyrian queen, who is known to later generations as Semiramis. So, this historical site decounts Hislop's and says he's inaccurate. There's so much to touch on this video, but the other thing, never, just automatically believe what's told you. Please, just don't do it. Just study for yourselves. So, I have said before that there's no proof pre-Christian era of some of these things. I noticed in the video, let's see, I want to get the title right, Easter and the Church, that she put up a graphic of an ancient statue of a goddess and a rabbit, right? And pulling that off as something linked to the Christians starting to starting to recognize Resurrection Day and the timing and calling it Easter and stuff like that. Of course, we know when Venerable Bede wrote his writings, right? Okay, so that was in 700 CE, and we know the location. However, anyway, the statue in the video, I looked it up. It took a little bit to actually get, because the internet is full of just plethora of lies. You have to go from source to source to source to source to actually find actual truth. It's you have to stay up all night doing that. You have to, sometimes, hours, weeks, months of just tracking down, because you can't believe everything that's out there. You just can't. Okay, so that statue thrown in there to make it look like this was a statue of, the Germanic goddess, and, that's where we got Easter eggs, and to plant it in there, and maybe she did that not knowing, or maybe she did it knowing, but at any rate, the actual statue is a Mayan whistle, so it's Mayan, okay, so that's Central South America region. It's a Mayan whistle in the form of the moon goddess and a rabbit consort, and it's from CE 600. Okay, so there's no connection there. That was just thrown in the video to appeal to the eyes and, the shock value that you see this and your brain goes, oh, they're right, until you actually study it. I mean, what is so harmful about studying claims that people promote? I don't get it. But anyway, no, that statue in that video, there's no connection. That's a bunch of crap, okay? That infuriates me because I hate it when people pull off things as if they're like connected or true, and no one checks on the sources. We just, all happily believe it. It's frustrating. Anyway, the other thing that I wanted to bring up is, okay, so Easter was not at the spring equinox. Some claim that Jesus' resurrection was celebrated to coincide with fertility festivals which occurred then. The truth is, the resurrection coincided with the time of the Passover, which was set by God. The early church in the East actually celebrated the resurrection at the time of the Jewish Passover. Okay. The Western church started celebrating it Sunday at the first full moon after the spring equinox. So it was never celebrated on the vernal equinox. So this actually was pre-Constantine. Okay, so the claim that Constantine did all this. Easter was discussed at the Council of Nicaea. It would be worth your while to actually go and find an actual copy of the 325 Council of Nicaea, so you can actually see what it says, because there's a lot of lies going around about that too. And so Easter was chosen, but first of all, it wasn't chosen by the Roman Catholic Church, because although Constantine called the council, and was there. It wasn't decided by him, and it wasn't decided by the Roman Catholic Church. As a matter of fact, okay, so the Council of Nicaea had over 300 attending, and there was only 2 representatives from Rome. These were just the Eastern and the Western churches, and they're trying to pinpoint when to, because there was 2 different viewpoints, which was pre-Germanic claims by Bede. It was, nearly 2,000 years pre, well, 1,500 years, let's say, 1,500 years pre-Hislop, where the discussion was going on. But it did not, Easter was not celebrated, Resurrection Day was not celebrated or chosen, and remember, just at the Council of Nicaea by Constantine, Easter was actually long before Constantine. Okay, so there are 12 early Christians that wrote about keeping, let me see here. One of the first controversies, that was it, that's what I wrote down, of the church was around 190 AD, and it was about the date to celebrate Easter, Resurrection Day. Since Eastern Christians celebrated at the time of the Jewish Passover, Western Christians favored the first moon after the spring equinox. They obviously celebrated something, and it wasn't the Jewish Passover, or they had nothing to disagree about. And there was not a single early Christian writer who wrote against Easter. There was 12 who have mentioned in their writings, and you can go to an early church father where that's all cataloged. It's not just, you have to be careful not to go to sites that throw quotes in there, because I've found that often quotes are plucked out of context and sometimes aren't even accurate. So it's best to go to their writings. Find where that's, if there's a claim, where that's mentioned. Is it in context? Is that really what they say? So there is Theophilus of Caesarea, that was 180 AD. That his quote was, "We would have you know too that in Alexandria also they observed the festival on the same day as ourselves. For the Paschal letters are sent from us to them, and from them to us, so that we observe the holy day in unison and together." That was in the epistle on the question of the Passover ante-Nicene fathers. Now remember that it wasn't the Passover. They weren't doing the Jewish Paschal. There's a difference. They were doing the Christian, which was celebrating the resurrection of Christ. Melito of Sardis, who died in 190 AD, he was one that observed on the Jewish Passover, the resurrection of Jesus. And he wrote an entire work on Easter called On Pascha. Irenaeus, 182 to 188, wrote an entire treatise on Easter as Fragment 7, Questions and Responses of Orthodoxy. Polycrates, or however you say that, of Ephesus, 196 AD, was for a time excommunicated by the Bishop of Rome, which was pre-Roman Church. Let's get that straight. That's not the Roman Catholic Church yet. For being one that celebrated Easter on the Jewish Passover. Tertullian, 200 to 240, we rejoice in the same privileges also from Easter to Whitsunday. And that's from the Chaplet, chapter 3, page 94. Hippolytus, Bishop of Portus, he was 225 to 235. He criticized those who observed Easter on the Jewish Passover at the same time the Jews celebrate Passover. That's in the Refutation of All Heresies, Book 8. Origen, he's 225 to 254. This is his quote. "He who considers that Christ our Passover was sacrificed for us, and that is his duty to keep the feast by eating the flesh of the Word. Never ceases to keep the Paschal feast, for Pascha means a Passover, and he is ever striving in all his thoughts, words, and deeds to pass over the things of this life to God. That's in Origin Against Celsus, Book 8, Chapter 22, page 647. Cyprian of Carthage, 246 to 258, in his letters 29, 39, and 54, speaks of an Easter day. Firmilian, 246 to 258, mentions the celebration of Easter. Letter 74, chapter 6, page 391. Anatolius of Alexandria, 270 to 280, discusses when Easter should be celebrated. That right there tells you that it was not the Jewish, because remember, the Jewish one was set. And that's in Paschal Canon, chapter 10, page 146 to 147, and it's also in chapter 15, 150 to 151. Melchion is 270 AD, says the evil Paul of Samosata did on the Paschal festival, letter written by Melchion in the name of the Synod of Antioch against Paul of Sarasota, and instructions of Commodanius, chapter 75, page 218. They will assemble together at Easter, that day of ours most blessed, and let them rejoice. Methodius was 270 to 311, mentions a fast which prepares for the Easter celebration. Banquet of the Ten Virgins, Book 3, Chapter 12, page 321. In summary, unless Constantine time traveled, these early Christians give us proof they celebrated Easter long before Constantine was born. And so it is estimated, there's an estimation that prior to Nicaea, 30 to 40,000 Christians were martyred for their faith. That's a lot of people. And they were not killed for believing Jesus was a nice guy worthy of worship, but they were tortured, burned, roasted, sliced, impaled, all of that, thrown to wild animals. In public, often while fellow Christians were watching, because they would worship none except the triune God. To say these early Christians, who often died for what they believed in, wanted to worship a Chaldean Sumerian idol, shows almost total ignorance of the early Christian faith. Of the almost 4,200 pages of pre-Nicene Christian writings, while they only show support for Easter, while they only show support of Easter, they only show criticism of the Chaldean religion. And so there's plenty who support Easter but are debating which date to celebrate it on. And there's a list of, there's like 10 of them, who discuss the support of Easter, and they actually discuss that a good portion of them were not doing it on the Jewish Passover. So at any rate, this discussion is basically showing you, that you have pre-Nicene Christians, there was conflict about when to celebrate it. Sure. But there was a distinct separation between what they celebrated and what the Jews did. Now, even the ones that wanted to celebrate on the Jewish Passover were celebrating it different than the Jews, because they were celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ. They weren't celebrating the Jewish events from the Torah. And yes, you could say, then they were in heresy. But my whole point is that let's stop blaming things on Constantine all the time. But anyway, your timeline doesn't even fit anyway. And there's so many other things in that video that, I don't want to ramble on. But Can you please show some proof? I mean, I would just absolutely love that if you can just show something besides a video that someone made. That really that video. Okay, the what she was mentioning about the egg coming from, I can't remember what it was that she said, sky and all that. That's not in history. None of what she said is written in history. Like, are you serious right now? It's a well done video, but well done videos does not mean historical fact. Okay? Oh boy. Anyway, I guess I've rambled on enough. Please be factual. Please, by next Resurrection Day, can you pull up something more credible than a video someone made? Anyway, love you. Bye.